Welcome to Live Without Limits, the Success Shift, Think Like Your Future Self. And this was one that I was supposed to do on Saturday, but was unable to, and I chose to do it at this time because I think this is a very important topic that we should all think about. I'm your host, Davida Shinsky, and today we're talking about something that quite influences your emotions, your relationships, and your confidence, and even your decisions that you make on a daily basis, your inner child, not in a complicated or abstract way, but a very real and practical way, because here's the truth. Parts of your past are still showing up in your present because you are constantly protecting that inner child. Because think about it. When you talk to yourself, who are you talking to? You're talking to your inner child. That inner child is the one that is traumatized early in life, and that's the one that you're protecting in how you relate to the people around you. The way you react, the way you think, the way you protect yourself, the way you and all that is often connected experiences from earlier in your life. And if these experiences haven't been processed or healed, they keep you stuck in a problem and patterns that don't reflect who you are today or who you want to become. But here's the shift. Healing your inner child isn't about staying in your past. It's about freeing yourself from it so you can move forward. In this episode, we're going to talk about what the inner child really is, how unhealed experiences show up in your life, and why certain emotional patterns repeat, and how to begin healing so that you can step into the future as your true self with clarity, confidence, and strength. So let's get to it. What is the inner child? Well, let's start here. The inner child is, and it represents the past of you that carries your early experiences, your emotional memories, your unmet needs, your beliefs formed when you were younger. It's that part of you that learned feels safe, what feels threatening, what you believe about yourself, how you respond to the world. And the important thing is to understand this. Your inner child is not your weakness. It's your emotional foundation. It's where many of your patterns were created. Let me give you an example of that. As a young child, I grew up in a very toxic family. My father physically abused, and my mother emotionally, verbally, and psychologically abused. They were the way they were simply because of the home they came from, and they didn't know any different, because my father was born in 1909 and my mother was born in 1918. And in those days, they knew nothing about what it means to show love, what it means to be in love, or how relationships create a loving and healthy environment for children. And they treated and did the things that they did based on what they experienced as children, because that's all they knew. Therefore, and I was the one that got the brunt of everything because I was the middle child. And not only that, because with my physical disability, I had to wear a brace to walk, and therefore it had to be my fault, because God forbid my mother protected my younger sister every time she initiated any kind of arguments and abuse, and allowed her to continue to do it. Therefore, after my mother left, my sister continued to do it and always felt as though she should never be called out for her behavior. And therefore, as an adult, when she worked as a teacher, she ended up being in a position where she never stayed in the same school more than a year or two. And after 19 years of teaching, she had to take 3 years off before she could go back and finish up the last 11 years of teaching so that she could get a 30-year retirement income. Therefore, understanding exactly how your inner child works is this. If you experience rejection, you may have learned, I'm not enough. If you experience criticism, you may have learned, I have to be perfect. If you didn't feel heard, you may have learned, my voice doesn't matter. And these beliefs don't just disappear. They follow you into adulthood. And I can say this much. Oh, when I was in college, I always understood what was going on in the home enough to know that what they were doing was wrong. And the fact that I grew up with a disability at a time when there were no laws that guarantee people with disabilities rights to employment or education, I learned my own opportunities. And I'm very lucky that my personality was to be very, very outgoing, because it helped me understand that when my mother was sitting there telling me, sit in a corner and shut up and don't say anything, that's not who I am. And I learned that I had to do what was right for me, not what was right for them. And not only that, because they couldn't control me in one way, they were going to figure out a way to control me in another way. And that's why I was abused financially and not treated fairly when it came to getting clothes, when it came to shoes, basically when it came to taking care of my material needs. We need clothing. We all need shoes. We all need, there's all basic needs that we all have. And if you do not get that, then there is a deprivation. And what it does is that I found that as an adult, I had to alienate myself from my family because it was the only way I was going to survive. Because anytime a family acts as a cohesive union, because they expect each other to act a certain way. And if one person changes, they're going to try and pull you back in because they can't let go of being and trying to control you, because that's all they know how to do. So, and the only way you can protect yourself is to stay as far away from toxic people as you can possibly get, even if it's your own family. How the inner child shows up in your life. You may not be consciously think about the past every day, but your emotional patterns often come from it. Your inner child shows up when you overreact to small situations, feel triggered by certain behaviors, struggle with self-doubt, seek validation from others, avoid conflict or confrontation, fear rejection or failure, and you might say, I don't know why I feel this way, but often it's not about what's happening now. It's about what rewards you, what reminds you of someone, or rather say it this way, what it reminds you of. And I can tell you this much, that coming from the home where I had a father that physically abused and studying psychology, as much as I knew that that was not the kind of relationship I wanted in my life with someone, I also knew it would be easy for me to fall back into that simply because it was a comfort zone. And I can remember back when I was in high school and all these girls had boyfriends, how many times they broke up with these guys and still went back with them because that was how they were used to being, and they didn't think that they needed to be treated better or demanded to be treated better. So recognizing how and why you react in certain situations and why you're willing to stay in an environment where you're being physically, mentally, or emotionally abused is because that's what you experienced as a child and didn't learn how to break that pattern. So, someone doesn't respond to your message and suddenly you feel rejected, unimportant, anxious. The situation itself is small, but the emotional response is bigger because it connects to something deeper. And here's what the inner child is saying. That's your, I felt this before. Remember, if you feel something in a certain way as a child and then it repeats itself as an adult, it's just a memory coming back to you to what happened in the past and how you responded to it. So why unhealed patterns keep you stuck? When your inner child is unhealed, you tend to operate from protection instead of growth. You might avoid risk to prevent failure, stay quiet to avoid rejection, overachieve to feel worthy, people please to feel accepted. And while these patterns have helped you at one point, they may not help you at this point. They hold you back now because they keep you living from fear, old beliefs, past experiences, instead of possibility, confidence, and growth. This is where many people get stuck. They want to move forward, but they're still reacting from old emotional patterns. The shift, healing to move forward is there. Understanding it, knowing exactly where you're coming from, exactly what it is that you want. Here's an important truth. Healing your child is not about going forward. It's about moving forward with awareness. It's about understanding why you feel, what you feel, why you react the way you do, what beliefs you've been carrying so that you can choose differently. Because when you bring awareness to your patterns, you create choice, and choice creates change. And recognizing this, healing allows you to respond instead of react, build self-trust, strengthen emotional resilience. So let go of those limiting beliefs. Step into your future self and recognize where you're at and where it is that you want to be. So, excuse me, how to begin healing your inner child. The first thing you need to do is increase your awareness. Start noticing your emotional reactions and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What triggered this? When something feels intense, there's often a deeper layer, because we are layered people in everything and in the way we are, that every day who you are today is not who you were 10 years ago, who you were 15 years ago, even who were 30 years ago. When you're born, you're a blank slate. Every day as you experience something, you learn. Remember that baby, that they don't know that that parent is going to always be there for them. So whenever they don't see that person, they cry. As they get older, as they learn that what response, why a baby cries after the first time, because they learn that gets them the response they want. As a child becomes verbal, they learn how to interact with people. Remember, each stage of your life is an experience. Everything that you experience from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 is building that idea of how to react from one day to the next. Separate past from present. Remind yourself this is happening now, but it connected to something from before. You are not that younger version of yourself anymore. You have more awareness, more tools, more strength. Reframe the belief. What did I learn from this experience? Is that belief still true? For example, I'm not enough becomes I am growing and I'm capable. My voice doesn't matter because my voice is valuable. So actually understanding all of these steps, understanding how you're reacting in any given situation helps you understand why you react the way you do. Give yourself what you needed. This is powerful. Ask, what did I need in that moment? What is support? Or rather, was it support, validation, understanding, safety, and begin to give that to yourself now, because healing often comes from meeting your own needs in the present. And remember, we all have needs that we need to fulfill. And if that's love and affection, finding that right person that can help you get what it is that you truly need and live in the present with them. Act from your future self. This is where transformation happens. Ask yourself, how would my future self respond in this situation? Your future self feels emotions, but doesn't get controlled by them. Responds with clarity, trusts ourselves, moves forward with intention. And that's the version of you that you begin to step into and recognize as being where you literally to be right now. Integrating healing with growth. Healing and growth go together. It doesn't have to choose between working on yourself and making and moving forward. You can do both. In fact, healing allows you to move forward more powerfully because you're no longer reacting from old wounds. Remember, those old wounds may have scabs on them, but it doesn't mean that those scabs can't come off and be rubbed raw. Held back by limiting beliefs, stuck in emotional patterns. Instead, you're choosing your response, and that's where the real change happens. And remember, what you're trying to do is help yourself react. Take a moment to ask yourself, what patterns do I notice in my life? And then ask, where might these patterns have started? Not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself, because understanding creates compassion, and compassion creates healing. Now, before I close, I want to tell you a story that I think is very, very important. That I'm very lucky that my behavior pattern was to be very outgoing and to have very strong interpersonal skills, because the messages that I was being given by society and my family was that because I have a disability, I should hide. I should not interact with people. I should cringe whenever people are around and try to make myself look smaller. But that was not who I am. And what I did was totally do the opposite. That is why I became very active as an adult early on in disability rights. And I can tell you that I grew up in a Savannah, Georgia, which is, everyone tends to have, it's become more of a tourist town, and it was the original city that founded the state of Georgia, and it was the original capital, but the city itself depended on the port for business. They never brought any real industry in other than the paper mill. And therefore, it's a city that never quite grew, but it became a tourist attraction because it had the old cobblestones, because a lot of they built on the historic homes that from the early 18th century. And so it was not a town that was forward thinking. It was always a town that was kind of holding back in how they did things, in their way of thinking. And so what happened was I was ostracized by my peers because I was different, because very few people at that time acknowledged people with disabilities, acknowledged that we existed. And because I was different, I became the brunt of a lot of bullying and teasing because it was easy to tease someone than try to get to know them and understand why they acted the way they did. And this really did play on my head, but because I was outgoing, I would always question, why me? Why me? And if you remember back in the 60s, that's when a lot of the self-help industry really got established and really started. And it started with psychodrama, and it started with transactional analysis, and it started with Eric Berne. It started with Freud, when people started to begin to, if you remember, the 50s was very conservative. In the 60s, the music changed. The baby boomers began to become more aware. You started seeing more women, instead of going and getting married, wanting to get educations, wanting to hold jobs, wanting to own their own business. It was and that's what brought about the self-help industries. And when we talk about the laws of attraction and The Secret, all of that is built off of what started and got established in the 60s, and the awakening, if you remember all the music and how that changed and how music became a part of the movement in the change. Understanding all of this, recognizing it for what it is, and how to take it and move forward. And because of that, I became a disability rights advocate and advocating for myself and my own rights. And as the laws began to change, as society began to change, I became an active participant in helping to make changes. In fact, when the Olympics came to Atlanta, the Atlanta IOC did not want to bid for the Paralympics because at that time they were bid for separately. But it was the disability community that got together and brought the Paralympics to Atlanta, and they were treated as the stepchild. They didn't have the housing was not made adaptive for the athletes. And then the head of the IOC went and made sure the bylaws were changed so that then, when any host country and host city bid for the Olympics, they're not only bidding for the Olympics, but they're bidding for the Paralympics. And they have to prepare for both at the same time. So recognizing this, seeing this, and understanding where it came from, and just how important it was for the disability community to help bring about that change. Now, if there's any one that I want you to take away from today's episode, it's this. You are not broken. You are responding to what you've experienced. And when you bring awareness, compassion, and intention to those patterns, you create the ability to change them. Holding and healing your inner child is not about staying in the past. It's about freeing yourself from it. You can become who you meant to be. So today, I want you to take one step. Notice your reactions and choose to respond differently, because every time you do, you make and get closer to your self. This is Davida Shinsky. And this is Live Without Limits, the success shift. Think like your future self, where you don't stay defined by your past. You grow beyond it. And I'll see you in the next episode. And what I want to finally say is this. You have the right to move forward. You have to first learn what happened in your past, what those traumas were, and how you can take and make the change so that you can move forward and be the person that you were truly meant to be and not allow others to live your life for you.